Hello everyone, Baconator here, and welcome back to another episode of Smite Tactics, where today we will be going over the tier list for the Norse Pantheon. So let's get started. First off, what's very unique about the Norse Pantheon is that it's the only class right now that has two leaders in it, so we'll take a look at both of them one at a time. First one here is Freya. So Freya is a melee character, so not ranged, keep that in mind. She has 2 extra health than the ranged characters, and she still has 1 attack. Her ability is banish an enemy god or minion until the start of your next turn. Now, it doesn't say it on the card, but this does cost 2 mana, similar to the other abilities that we've seen, hero abilities. So keep that in mind. And right now, I would say Freya is the second best leader in the game right now, because the banish effect is very good. What does banish do? Banished unit is unable to be targeted, damaged, and cannot act. So basically, it's just, you spend 2 mana, and 1 minion or god that's on the battlefield, not a hero, but a god or minion, can just basically be removed from the game for a turn until you can deal with it. Which makes this really good, because as long as you're able to do it, of course, because sometimes, depending on the cards in your hand, you want to play that big minion. So you're at 5 mana and you have a Ymir in your hand, you obviously want to play your Ymir right then. Or even if you have like a Thor in your hand of 4 mana, when you have only 5 mana, you can't use your banish effect, you need to play that minion you got. So obviously it all depends on the mana, but when you are able to spend that mana to banish a god or minion, it is a very good ability, because it can completely deem 1 card from their opponent's plays completely useless until you're finally not able to banish it again, or until you're just able to remove it with relative ease. So the banish effect is very good, and it makes Freya definitely the best of the 2 leaders in the Norse Pantheon. Let's get to the other one. Odin.
Valhalla beckons you.
Odin is the same health and attack as Freya, with 1 attack, 20 health. His ability is a little different. Now first off, Odin's ability, it doesn't say this as well, but it only costs 1 mana instead of 2, so it's different in that aspect. But let's see what it does. Give a friendly +1 attack damage until the start of your next turn. This is what I consider the worst one. You can make an exception that Rob's ability might be worse, but I think this one is worse strictly because it is useless on Odin. The thing with Odin is that, or with the Norse Pantheon in itself, is that they have a card that gives their heroes, their leaders, +1 attack permanently for the whole game. So basically this ability, it becomes useless because you're losing damage if you use this ability, because when you use a leader ability, you're not allowed to attack. So basically by using this ability, and say you've already buffed your leader up by 2 or even 3 to 2 or 3 attack, then by giving that increased +1 attack damage, you're effectively losing damage you can do. Now of course the leader is not going to take that damage for attacking because of that, but you're still losing damage that if you use this ability without, or instead of attacking, then you might not be able to kill something off, which means that you can almost never use this ability. So pretty bad ability, especially because he's melee. If he was ranged, the ability would be good maybe, but since he's only melee, it just makes it a terrible ability. First card in the Norse Pantheon is a spell, 1 mana, Backstab. Deal 3 damage to the enemy leader. Very self-explanatory card. It's just some burst damage, from really cheap burst damage in your hand. And it's basically a card that is not good, but it's very good in decks where you're just trying to aggressively kill the opponent's leader as fast as possible. So if you're playing like a type of control deck or something that you want the game to last long, this is a terrible card for you. But if you're trying to play a deck where you just play a bunch of small minions and just completely just take down your enemy really quickly, and this is a great card because it does that quick damage to the leader. So Backstab, it works in the quick decks, but in the slow decks you would never want to see this card. Now, our first minion for the Norse Pantheon is Cursed Warrior. 1 mana, 1/1, and it spawns an additional Cursed Warrior. So basically 1 mana for 2 1/1s. Now, this is a bad card. Now you might not think it is a bad card. You're getting 2 1/1s for 1 mana. That's good, right? Well, it isn't, because 1/1s are bad for one instance, having 1 health. But what really makes it bad is the fact that it's melee. So you're playing a 1/1 melee unit, it's going to be almost impossible to get that melee unit in a position where it can even deal that damage. without just getting picked off from a ranged even leader, because leaders have 1 damage. So, so if you play your Cursed Warrior, all their enemy leader has to do is walk back away from the Cursed Warrior and then just shoot it from afar. And then it's dead and it did effectively nothing. Now you do get 2 of them, which makes it okay, and there is a card that does work well with the card like this. So again, this card is very bad, but I could see it be used in one of those aggressive decks with the backstab like I was talking about earlier. This is the card that works well with Cursed Warrior. It's Mayhem. 1 mana, randomly deal 1 damage for every friendly on the battlefield. So this card is really good when you have a lot of minions on the field. So this is where Cursed Warrior is okay, because you're spawning 2 minions for the cost of 1 mana. So you can make Mayhem do some work, get a lot of damage for just 1 mana. I mean, just 1 Cursed Warrior and then play Mayhem, that's 3 damage, because Mayhem also triggers off of your leader. So you're automatically, as long as your leader's alive, which you will be doing 1 damage with Mayhem. And for every other god and minion you have, you do an extra damage. Now it is randomly distributed, so it's not that good. So again, it's a card that I think is good in aggressive decks, but not in like a control-y mid-range deck. So again, Norse right now is looking a lot like a very aggressive deck with the cards it has. But let's see what else they have. Next we have another spell, Valhalla's Blessing. 1 mana, add a random Norse card into your hand from your deck, it costs 1 less. This is a good card. It's a slow card because it is card draw, so it's not that good. And also, it is free though. That's the thing that's good about it. You're basically drawing a card for free because whatever card you get costs 1 less. This card only costs 1 mana. So you're getting it that it's basically free. You just get it in your hand for free and you play it when you're able to. The problem with this card, however, though, is since there are a lot of low-cost cards in the Norse deck, that there's a good chance that when you use Valhalla's Blessing, you just draw something bad that you don't want. Because this is any random Norse card. This isn't like Divine Intervention from the Greek Pantheon, which gives you guaranteed god cards. This could give you a god card from the Norse Pantheon, but it also could give you like a Mayhem or a Cursed Warrior. And basically now you're just getting some mediocre, really aggressive cards for free, which isn't good. So Valhalla's Blessing, I don't think really has this fit right now, because card draw is not something you want in your control decks, or excuse me, your aggressive decks. And in control decks, it can work in some regard. Right now, because how card draw works in this game, I don't think it's a very good card and you shouldn't be running it. Next we have another minion, Cursed Hunter. 2 mana, 1/1, ranged, and spawn an additional Cursed Hunter. So this is basically your Cursed Warrior in its ranged form. It costs 1 mana more, but having the ranged effect makes this actually valuable. This card is a good card, unlike Cursed Warrior, because of that ranged effect. This is what makes all the difference. Because now, you can pick them off from afar, whatever melee cards your opponent summons. And also, if the leaders do attack these guys to try to kill them off, they are at least taking some return damage back, so it's not completely useless. So, even though it does cost a mana more, having 2 1/1s with the ranged effect is good. Especially for most decks in the Norse Pantheon right now. This is a good card. I would always run it in your aggressive decks because of how Mayhem works with having 2 minions from this. It's also really good. And I think this also works in like control-y type decks too, because it's just a solid 2-drop, and 2-drops right now are rare right now. Maybe once the game gets more cards and they add more 2-drops for the Pantheons, then it might get out of the meta, but for now, while there's very limited 2-drops, Cursed Hunter is a good card. Now we have another spell, Fate. 2 mana, deal 2 damage up to 2 random enemies. This is a great card. This is a card that you want in your aggressive decks and your control decks 100% of the time. 2 mana, you deal 2 damage. This is basically 2 Sunders. Now it is random, so if there is multiple minions on the field, then you can't guarantee it will hit the one you need. But because it does hit 2 random enemies, there is a good chance that you can control this RNG effect by just removing one of the minions ahead of time that you don't want it to hit, and then it will hit and then it'll guarantee to hit the other one you want it to hit, because this also hits the leader too. So basically, if their leader only has one minion or god on the field, Fate is guaranteed to hit that minion and also hit their leader at the same time. So as long as you can limit the cards that are on the field for your opponent, Fate is really good because you control the effect. And even when you're not able to do that, most of the time it will still be a good effect, because dealing 2 damage is very good in this game, especially twice. Good card, definitely want to run it. Now we have our first god card. This is Kaldir, 2 mana 2/2. Ability gain +1/+2 when Skadi is in play. So basically, when you have Skadi, this is a 3/4 for 2 mana, which is great. Unfortunately, Skadi currently has an effect right now that just gives her a Kaldir in your hand once you play her. So running the Kaldir card on it alone is not good, because a 2 mana 2/2 sucks. Especially because it's not range, it's melee. So a 2 mana 2/2 is not that good. Basically, I wouldn't run this card ever alone. If you're gonna run this card, you have to just run Skadi, and then when you play Skadi, you get a Kaldir for free. There's no need to have too many Kaldirs in your hand. It'd be much better to put in a Cursed Hunter or a Fate instead of putting a Kaldir in your deck. Basilisks are even better than running Kaldirs. So when you play this with Skadi, then you're good. When you play it alone, terrible. Now we have the card I was talking about earlier, Gungnir's Smite. 3 mana, give your leader +1 attack permanently. So this is the card I was talking about that basically makes Odin's ability completely useless, because this just buffs your leader. So since these are the only melee leaders in the game currently, having this card is a blessing for them. This used to be on Raw, actually this used to be a Raw card, and it was completely OP because it was ranged. Now that it's on the melee characters, it's pretty balanced and a really good card. Not a really good card, maybe not as good, because it is a slow card. When you're playing this card, you are wasting 3 mana, and while your leader is going to get that extra attack, you're basically giving up your rights to play a minion, which could be just as good, or even better. So say you play a Gungnir's Smite for 3 mana, and then your opponent plays a Basilisk, you're not able to kill that Basilisk with your 2 attack only. So they are gaining tempo on you. This card is still good, and I would definitely still run it in definitely my aggressive decks, and probably control decks still. Not as good as it may look on first sight, but still, I like it. Now we have another spell, Hasten Vitalis. 3 mana, allow a friendly exhausted unit to attack again. This is a good spell. What this does basically, this allows you to either do 2 attacks, or allows you to use an ability and then attack after using this card. So basically this just gives you more momentum. Because especially when you use the right cards to combo this with. So say you have a Ymir in play, you use his ability to stun 2 enemies, and then you give him Hasten Vitalis, and then he can also attack for 2 damage for free. Say you use this on your leader Freya, you can banish, or wait, can this work? I'm actually not sure if it does work on leaders, but let's say it does work on leaders. You can banish a card with Freya and then use Hasten Vitalis on her and then attack. And where this card really shines is when you use it with Loki, because with Loki, we'll get to him later, he has a really strong ability. You use that ability with Loki, and then you give him Hasten Vitalis, and then you can attack with him also, and that gives a lot of burst damage to anything. So Hasten Vitalis is a really good spell, and I would definitely, maybe not as good in aggressive decks, but can definitely be played in aggressive decks, and I think it's better in control decks.
Oh, Calder, who's the best destroyer of gods? You are, yes you are, yes you are.
Now we have Skadi, 3 mana 2/3, so the stats are meh, not that good. It's basically a Basilisk for 1 mana more. She is ranged, which makes her really good now, because those stats are good for a ranged character for that mana. And Invoke. Invoke triggers whenever the unit spawns, so this is what I was talking about earlier. Add an additional Kaldir card into your hand, and her ability on her own is deal 2 damage to an enemy and reduce their movement by 1. Skadi is extremely powerful right now, probably the best Norse card in the game currently. So you play a 3 mana 2/3 ranged. You draw a Kaldir to your hand, and since Kaldir shines when Scotty is in play, you get basically a 2 mana 3/4 most of the time, unless they're able to quickly kill your Scotty. And if you position her correctly, that is very hard to do, unless they have like a Sunder or Magma Slam or something along those lines. Not only that, but her ability is very unique in the fact that it never goes on cooldown. So with most abilities, if you use them, you have to wait one full turn. The next turn you're not able to use them, and then after that you can use it again. For Scotty, she can use her ability every single turn, which is really powerful because basically it's a 3 mana 2/3 ranged with Pardon, because she does 2 damage normally with her basic attack, but with her ability she also deals 2 damage, and she gets a bonus effect added, and Pardon also. So Scotty, a really powerful card, a must for any type of Norse control deck or mid-range deck, and probably not that good in aggressive decks because she is slow to develop. Now we have Sol, another god, 3 mana 2/2, so stats are very bad. What's unique about her though, first off, she has range, so that makes up for a little bit of it. Still not that good because of the 2 health. But she also has the unique ability Ambush. Ambush can't be directly targeted by enemies the turn it spawns. So basically, she was almost always guaranteed to live till the next turn, unless your enemy plays, like say you're playing another Odin or another Freya, and they use a Fate, and Sol is the only unit you have out, then Sol is dead, because Fate will kill it. But these are the only ways you can kill a Sol. They have to be randomly applied. They can't be targeted. So that means you're almost always able to get Sol to that next turn to use her ability, and oh boy is her ability really good. She deals 2 damage to all enemies in the target area. Now Sol's target area is very unique because it is basically a T formation in front of her. So what that means is that the first three units in front of her all get hit by the target area, and then after you go 3 units up, you go one to the left of it and one to the right of the final line. So basically it creates a T. So this hits 5 areas for 2 damage, and every enemy inside those 5 areas will take that 2 damage, which is very powerful. Of course, this card is all about positioning. You want to make sure she's in a position where you can hit multiple targets at once. And when you're playing against this all, it's very important to make sure your characters are in a position where they can't get hit multiple times at once. So a very good card that completely relies on positioning whether or not it's good or not. Now we move on to another minion, Surtur, 3 mana 1/3, so stats are not that great. The ability is an aura, adjacent friendlies gain +1 attack. So this card is kind of like Argus from the Greek Pantheon, where the mana cost is too much for the stats to actually make it a good card, and this is not a good card. Where this card does work, however, though, is in those aggressive decks. Because with those aggressive decks, you're definitely playing Cursed Warriors, you're definitely playing Cursed Hunters, and since you're playing so many small minions like that, buffing their attack up by +1, you're getting a lot of value off of Surtur here. So that is where this card can be good, is in those aggressive decks, but basically anywhere else, this card is just a very bad 3-drop. Now we go to another spell in the Norse Pantheon, that is Banish. 4 mana, banish enemy gods and minions in the target area. This card was okay for a time, but now with Freya as a leader, this card pretty much sucks now because her leader ability is Banish now. Now granted, Freya's Banish only hits one character, and this Banish hits 4 characters if they're in that target area. The target area is a 2x2 again, similar to most of the other ones we've seen. So you can banish multiple gods with this, but Banish is not that good when you're hitting too many targets, because you still want a target to hit. If this was something like a stun, like Cataclysm from the Egyptian Pantheon, then this would be good, but Banish is not that good, especially when the leader ability already effectively does this. So not a good card. Now we have Coerce, a 4 mana spell. All friendly minions gain +1/+1. This card, again, I don't think is very good. you'll see later that there is another card similar to this one that works better in the aggressive decks, and basically this card would only work in the aggressive decks where you play a lot of small minions and then you buff them up. But this card, while the effect is permanent, for 4 mana, and most of the time you're not going to have all those small minions survive, it's just too little value probably for the mana cost. So, not a good card. Here is the other card I was talking about, Frenzy. 4 mana spell, all friendlies gain +2 attack this turn. This is a card you love to see in aggressive decks because suddenly you have an insane amount of burst damage and your opponent never really saw it coming. So say you have 2 Cursed Hunters alive on the field, you play Frenzy, now you have, instead of 2 1/1s with range, now you have 2 3/1s with range, which will do a lot of damage to enemy gods, enemy minions, and the enemy leader itself, which makes Frenzy a must for those aggressive decks. For control decks, this card obviously is not that good. You don't really care for buffing +2 attack for just 1 turn. But for the aggressive decks, this is where this card really shines.
Sound the horns. There is
Now we go
battle
to
be met.
Thor, another god finally. 4 mana, 2/5 stats, so stats are alright. He is not ranged, so he is a melee character. And his ability, Thor gains +1 damage for every adjacent enemy that is around him until the start of your next turn. What is unique about this ability is not only can he activate this ability for the +1 damage, he can also use his basic attack the turn he uses this ability. So basically you're standing next to the leader and say another minion that the leader is next to. Then Thor is basically, you use his ability, you make him have 4 attack and 5 health, and then you attack for 4 damage to whatever card you want to hit. That is what makes Thor really good. If that ability would not activate the turn, or you would not be able to attack when you activate that ability, Thor would be a terrible card, because 2/5 is not that good for 4 mana, especially for melee. But because you can use that ability, Thor is definitely a good card, and you're almost always going to see him in your Norse control decks.
Time for some fun!
Now we have Loki, a 5 mana 5/3, so interesting stats, obviously aggressive stats. He has ambush like Soul, so he can't be targeted when you spawn him. And what's also good about this is that there's practically no card that can kill Loki unless they say have something like Double Fate or like a Fate Mayhem, because none of the other effects will really be able to directly target him. Yeah, you can stun him maybe if you're able to get next to him, but besides that you're not really going to be able to deal with him. And now his ability. Loki teleports to an enemy up to 3 tiles away, dealing 5 damage. So basically his ability is a pardon effect from range, which makes him really good. Now obviously when you use this ability, you are moving into range of practically anything your opponent will throw at you. So Loki is basically an all-in god. You deal your 5 damage to whatever you want. You probably kill it, unless you're attacking the leader, in which case you're just doing a lot of damage. And then you can probably expect him to die the next turn, but if he doesn't die, then your opponent is in for a rude awakening. This is why I said he was so good with Haste and Vitalis, because you can use your ability to deal 5 damage, give him Haste and Vitalis, and then you deal another 5 damage with your basic attack, which means you're doing 10 damage in 1 turn to something. A very good combo when you add those together, and a very good card even on its own.
I bring
Skip
the
one?
start
Oh,
of
no,
a
I
new
didn't.
Ragnarok!
Now we have a spell, Sprint, 5 mana, allow a friendly exhausted unit to move and attack again. So basically Sprint is just a worse Haste and Vitalis. Haste and Vitalis lets you instantly attack again, but you cannot move. But Sprint, now you can just move a couple tiles more before moving. So Sprint is really only good if you want to attack 2 minions on the same turn. So say you use Loki, you use his ability to kill, so say like a Aphrodite or something, and then after that you give him Sprint, and then you can move to where the Zeus is, and then you deal 5 damage to him as well. That's really one of the few situations where Sprint will actually be good. And for that mana cost, it's not a good card at all, and I wouldn't ever play this over Hasten Vitalis.
Ymir is here.
Now we have Ymir. He's a 5 mana 2/7, so very bulky stats. And his ability, Ymir stuns all enemies in the target area. The target area is similar to Hades, where it's the 3 units in front of him. So Ymir is a good card. He's not that good, but stun, since it's a good mechanic, it makes Ymir pretty alright. He's very bulky. He has 7 health, so really is very difficult to get rid of. His attack is not that good, but being able to stun and pretty much always being on the battlefield for most of the game after he spawned, he is definitely a good card in almost all control decks. In aggressive decks, he's a terrible card. You're not really going to want to play him. He's far too slow for that. But control decks love cards like this where they're hard to get rid of, so Ymir is a good card for that. And now we have Fenrir, 6 mana 3/4, so stats are terrible for the mana cost. What is his ability? Permanently gains +3/+3. Wow. So this is a very crazy ability. Now obviously Fenrir is a very slow character. You have to develop your little doggy right here before he goes out of control. You have to use 6 mana. You have to spend 6 mana to play him. You have to make sure he stays alive. Then the next turn you have to buff him, and then he becomes a 6/7, very hard to deal with. Then you have to wait another turn. Then you can start going to work to attack. Or if you want to, you can also buff him again to a 9/10 if you really want to, but probably 6/7 will be more than enough at that point. So Fenrir is all about just taking your time. He's obviously terrible for aggressive decks, but for control decks he is a card that control decks you'll always see. He takes a while to develop, but once he develops, he is a monster that pretty much no one can deal with unless it's a raw with an execute or something like that. That would about be the only time you can deal with him. So Fenrir, a great card for control decks, not that good for any other Norse deck. And that is it for the Norse cards, as you can see. In the next episode we will be going over the neutral cards to end off our tier list, and then we will move on to actually playing some games. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you in the next one.